So when we left off last week, we had said that by 1965 you have almost 200,000 troops in Vietnam. Um, by the end of 1967, United States forces had been going out on search and destroy missions because what was happening is that they had started to figure out, okay, this is what the VC do. They use these little villages, these little hamlets as places to store their weapons, to store food, and they convene at these places. They meet here, and then they go out, and from here they go out and they attack platoons that are out on patrol using guerrilla warfare type tactics. Disappear back into the jungle. They go back to these hamlets. They take everything back to the way it was, and that's it. Well, what's happened now is that the United States, as they're going out and they're trying to find these places. But as we get through 1968, or towards the end of 1967, the number of encounters between the U.S. military and the VC is actually starting to decrease a little bit, and the United States is thinking, well, it's two reasons. One is maybe that the VC, they're thinking, well, the United States, their military is superior to ours, and that we just can't contend with them. Or the other one is that every time a fight does break out, the United States inflicts more casualties than what they receive, and so thus the VC are having a hard time replacing those soldiers that they're losing. In reality, what's happening is the VC are setting up for something much bigger and better. But word back in the United States is the U.S. is winning, and it really kind of creates almost a false sense of security. The VC, what they're doing is they've gone underground, literally. I mentioned that when the Japanese were in South Vietnam during World War II, they started to dig tunnels. And when the VC discovered these, they just continued to make them more elaborate. In some places, you could literally have 200 to 300 VC that were underground, and U.S. platoon could literally be walking right over the top of them, and 20, 25 feet below are a couple hundred of VC soldiers. So then what happens is that Tet is the Vietnamese New Year. And in 1965, 1966, and 1967, on the day of Tet, the Vietnamese New Year, there was a ceasefire for just that one day. People would celebrate the New Year, and then they would just simply pick right back up where things had left off the day before. And so we get to 1968, and the day of Tet arrives, and instead of no fighting taking place, you have major battles that occur all over the place. On this particular map here, every one of these red dots signifies a major battle that took place. Almost every major military base in South Vietnam was attacked. And what had happened was the VC had dug tunnels right up to the perimeters of these military bases. In some of the large cities in South Vietnam, they had literally dug right into the sewer lines. And so you have VC soldiers that are popping up out of manhole covers in the middle of the street, that are popping up out of manholes that are on the side of the street, where when it rains, water goes down goes down into the drainage systems. And it's almost like disturbing an anthill. VC soldiers are just pouring up out of the ground. And back here in the United States, people are thinking, how in the world could a guerrilla military that is almost on the verge of defeat pull off such a major offensive? And the reason for it was because the United States government and military had been feeding the American people a load of lies, and that's what it boiled down to. Also, at the same time, back here, the United States people are thinking, this isn't right. What else is the government lying about? And so what this does is this creates what becomes known as a credibility gap, in that people no longer believe what they're being told. Now, from a military perspective, the Tet Offensive was a defeat for the VC. When you look at the numbers, the United States inflicted many more casualties than what they received. So from a military perspective, it was a defeat for the United States. But from a publicity perspective, it decimated the U.S. military. Again, back here, people no longer believe what they're being told. And then to make matters worse, in what's known as the An Quang Pagoda, there is a VC soldier that is captured, and there is a South Vietnamese general, and he walks up to this soldier is brought up to him, and this general is on his left, and he walks around to the right side of him, and in one motion pulls the revolver out of his holster and puts it up to the head of this VC soldier and pulls the trigger. And it happens right in front of a U.S. news crew along with an independent photographer. And since these are independent individuals, they don't have to worry about running this through the government, running this through the military. As fast as they can get that story back to the United States, they do. And of course, it's on the news. And people can't believe the fact that here the U.S. is, we're over in South Vietnam, we're supposed to be helping the South Vietnamese military, and this is what their military is doing. This guy's acting as judge, jury, and executioner, that instead of sending this prisoner to a POW camp, he just, he shoots him, he executes him right in the street. And the photographer that was there, right when the general pulls the trigger, this guy takes a picture. And so the picture is snapped right on impact.
My next guest, one of the funnest comedians around.
I remember it very vividly. This was done like right after Tet, and so we were in a place called the An Quang Pagoda.
Fighting was only a block from the An Quang Pagoda. Viet Cong flags had flown from these rooftops. Now,
And all of a sudden, we look to the right, and we see the South Vietnamese. We see them grabbing this guy. And all of a sudden, to my left, came this guy who we didn't know who he was. I seen him reach for his pistol, and I thought he was going to threaten him, like a lot of times this happens. I seen him go for his pistol. As fast as he brought up his pistol, not knowing he was going to shoot him, I took the picture. The bullet is in his head when the picture was taken.
The interesting thing about that particular image was that it was an image that was filmed by a TV camera crew, by one of the network crews. And there was a slice of that television footage that appeared on the news that evening. But the still images lingered in the memories because people could look at them as long as they wanted. They could go back to them. And people really had an opportunity to linger on them in the way they couldn't linger on television. And so they were seared into people's brains in a way that television just couldn't be.
We had a Vietnamese reporter in our bureau named Nguyen. I sent Nguyen to the An Quang Pagoda because I heard there would be some trouble. Later on in the afternoon, after Nguyen came back and said nothing to me, I heard that General Le Nguyen had executed a Viet Cong soldier with no trial. He'd just been captured. He executed him on the spot in front of American television and Eddie Adams' camera. When I asked Nguyen, why didn't he tell me what had happened? Nguyen said, Mr. Terry, General Lawon does that all the time. That's not news. But in America, that picture was news. Americans viewing Eddie Adams' picture said to themselves, that's enough. We've had it. We're not going to support a dictatorship. This is not democracy as we know it.
So you can see that, you know, why it was that people back here in the United States were so upset about this. So not only do you have people back here not believing what they're being told by the government or the military, now they're looking and saying, why are we helping this military, this South Vietnamese country, when they do this? You know, this is how they treat people. And so it really turned the tide in terms of public relations against the military. And then just when you think that things can't get any worse, then we have what's known as the My Lai massacre. So there had been a U.S. platoon that was out on patrol, and they get ambushed, and most of the platoon is killed. Those that survive, they get back to base, and they say what happened, and they say, well, we feel that the VC are using this hamlet or this village of My Lai as their place where they store everything. So soldiers, so they decide they're gonna. There's a group that they're going to go to the hamlet of My Lai, and they're going to try to. It's basically a search and destroy type mission. Well, when they get there, they find that the only ones there are elderly men, elderly women, women and children. And they search all over for a stash of weapons, and they find like these woven baskets that have large amounts of rice in them. That's commonplace in any hamlet you would go to in Vietnam. But the U.S. military is convinced that the VC are using this, and so they proceed to start burning down the huts. And as one of them is burning, a female villager comes running out and she's screaming, and a U.S. soldier yells "gun," and just like that, the U.S. soldiers open fire on the villagers, and when it's all said and done, it is literally a massacre. These people are unarmed, and it gets to the point where some U.S. soldiers they run out of bullets. I mean, they've used everything they have on them, and they start using the heels of their boots and the butts of their guns to smash in the skulls of villagers. Eventually, word of this gets back to the United States, and you end up having Lieutenant William Calley that is court-martialed, and he's sentenced to prison, and then his sentence is he's released after a fraction of his sentence is served. So in the next video, we'll watch, or in the next segment, you'll watch a video on the My Lai massacre.